My husband kicked my father out of our house on Thanksgiving. Not asked him to leave. Kicked him out. Physically blocked the doorway, pointed at the driveway, and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "I'm not having some hobo at my table. Get out." My father was standing on our porch in his work clothes. The same canvas jacket and steel-toed boots he'd worn every day for 30 years, stained with grease and concrete dust and the accumulated evidence of a life spent building things with his hands. He'd driven 4 hours from Scranton to spend the holiday with his daughter, and he was holding a pie my stepmother had baked and a bag with a bottle of wine. And he stood on my porch and heard my husband call him a hobo. And he didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't do any of the things a man of 6'1" and 210 pounds could have done. He set the pie on the porch railing. He set the wine beside it. He looked at me. 1 look, 3 seconds. The look of a father who is asking his daughter a question without words. And when I didn't move, when I stood in the hallway behind my husband's back and said nothing because I was a coward, and because saying something meant choosing and choosing meant consequences, my father nodded. Turned around, walked to his truck, and drove 4 hours back to Scranton on Thanksgiving night. Alone, with the radio off and the highway empty and his daughter's silent sitting in the passenger seat like a passenger he couldn't drop off. That was Thursday. On Friday morning, a courier arrived at our door with an envelope addressed to my husband, Tyler Whitfield. Tyler opened it at the kitchen table with the confident, annoyed expression of a man who considers unexpected mail a minor inconvenience. He read the first page. His face went white. He read the second page. His hands began to shake. He set the papers down and looked at me and said, in a voice I'd never heard from him, small, airless, the voice of a man who has just discovered that the ground he's standing on belongs to someone else. "Your father is suing me for $2 million. My father, the hobo, the man in the canvas jacket, the man Tyler had dismissed as beneath his table and his time and his attention. That man, Edward Callan, 61 years old, sole owner of Callan Industrial Contracting, a heavy construction firm with 38 employees, annual revenues north of $14 million, and a legal team that included the second largest litigation firm in northeastern Pennsylvania, was suing my husband. Not for the insult on the porch, for something else. Something older, something larger, something that had been sitting beneath our marriage like a fault line, invisible until the pressure of Thanksgiving cracked it open and everything underneath came pouring out. But I need to go back. My name is Lauren Whitfield. I'm 31. I married Tyler 4 years ago, and for most of those 4 years, I have been performing a version of myself that Tyler designed and I agreed to inhabit. A version that was embarrassed by her father's work boots, apologetic about her father's truck, and grateful that Tyler had elevated her from the world of canvas jackets into the world of press shirts and neighborhood associations and dinner parties, where people discussed wine regions and vacation properties, and nobody's hands were stained with anything. Tyler Whitfield, 35, was an investment analyst at a boutique wealth management firm in Philadelphia. He earned $170,000 a year, drove a BMW, and lived in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb where the lawns were maintained by services and the conversations were maintained by mutual agreement to never discuss anything real. Tyler was handsome, articulate, and possessed of the absolute, unexamined confidence of a man who has mistaken income for worth and salary for character, and who genuinely, sincerely believed that the distance between himself and a man in work boots was not a difference in occupation, but a difference in value. I met Tyler at a friend's engagement party. He was charming, attentive, and interested in me with the focused, proprietary intensity that I mistook for love, and that was actually selection. The process by which Tyler identified a woman who was attractive enough to complement his image, agreeable enough to defer to his preferences, and insecure enough about her background to let him define it. I was all three. I'd grown up in Scranton watching my father leave for job sites at 5 a.m., in boots that smelled like diesel, and I'd spent my 20s in Philadelphia trying to become a person whose father wore different shoes. Tyler saw this. Tyler saw the gap between who I was and who I wanted to be, and he installed himself in that gap like a bridge, and I walked across it, gratefully without looking down. My father knew. He never said it directly. Ed Callan was not a man who wasted words on things that could be communicated through silence and observation. But he knew. He met Tyler once before the wedding. Dinner at a restaurant in Scranton, my choice. A place that was nice but not fancy, because my father didn't do fancy and I knew Tyler would notice. Tyler wore a blazer. My father wore a clean flannel shirt, his version of formal, the best he offered, which to anyone paying attention was more than enough. Tyler shook his hand, assessed his clothes, and spent the dinner talking about his firm, his portfolio, his plans for a house in the suburbs, projecting success at a man he'd already classified as audience rather than equal. My father listened, ate his steak, drank one beer, asked Tyler exactly 2 questions. "Do you love my daughter?" Tyler said yes, fluently with the practiced ease of a man answering a question he expected. And, "Will you take care of her?" Tyler said yes again, with the slight, almost invisible condescension of a man who interprets "take care of" as financial provision, and doesn't understand that a man who builds bridges for a living means something different by the word care. After dinner in the parking lot, my father hugged me and said one sentence. "Make sure he sees you, Lauren. Not what he wants you to be." I didn't listen. The marriage settled into the pattern Tyler had designed. We lived in his suburb, attended his events, socialized with his colleagues. My father visited twice a year, once in summer, once at Thanksgiving. Each visit was a negotiation. Tyler complained about the truck in the driveway. Does he have to park that thing where the neighbors can see it? About the work boots. He could at least change before he comes inside. About the conversations my father had with the neighbors, who liked him. Genuinely liked him, because Ed Callan was the kind of man who helped a stranger fix a fence and remembered everyone's name and talked to people as though they mattered, regardless of their lawn service. Tyler's complaints were never direct. He didn't say, "I don't want your father here." He said, "I just think we should set some standards for the house." He said, "My colleagues might drop by." He said, "I'm not a snob, Lauren. I just think appearances matter." The word appearances did a lot of work in Tyler's vocabulary. It carried the weight of every judgment he made but didn't want to own, every prejudice he held but didn't want to name. Appearances. The shield behind which a man who looked down on a man in work boots could hide without admitting he was looking down. I accommodated. I asked my father to park the truck around the corner. I suggested he bring a change of clothes. I apologized. To Tyler, not to my father. For the boots, the jacket, the truck, the evidence of a life that my husband considered beneath his presentation. I did this because I was a coward, and because cowardice, when it lives inside a marriage, doesn't feel like cowardice. It feels like compromise. Like keeping the peace. Like the mature, reasonable behavior of a woman who loves her husband and her father and is simply managing the distance between them. I told myself I was managing. I was betraying. There is a difference, and it took Thanksgiving to teach me what it was. Thanksgiving was Tyler's idea. Not the holiday, the invitation. He suggested I invite my father, which surprised me, because Tyler had spent 3 years treating my father's visits the way you treat seasonal allergies. Endured, medicated, survived. But this year, Tyler was warm about it, enthusiastic even. "Invite Ed," he said. "It'll be nice. We'll do the whole thing. Turkey, wine, the works." I should have been suspicious. I wasn't. I was grateful. Grateful that my husband was welcoming my father, that the distance was closing, that the compromise was working. My father arrived at 2. The truck, the boots, the jacket, the pie, the wine. He'd driven 4 hours. My stepmother Donna hadn't come. She was with her own family in Allentown. So he'd come alone, which meant 4 hours of highway with nobody to talk to and a pie balanced on the passenger seat. Tyler answered the door. I was in the kitchen. I heard Tyler's voice. Not the words, just the register. Loud, sharp, the frequency of a man making a point. I came to the hallway and saw them. Tyler in the doorway, blocking the entrance, his arm extended toward the driveway. My father on the porch, pie in one hand, wine in the other. And Tyler saying, I'm not having some hobo at my table. Get out. He said it for the neighbors. I understood that immediately, with the sick, lurching clarity of a person who has been lying to themselves and has just run out of lies. Tyler had invited my father not to welcome him, but to perform the rejection in front of an audience. 2 of Tyler's colleagues lived on our street. The Warners were on their porch across the road. Tyler wanted witnesses. Witnesses to the moment he established, publicly and permanently, that the man in the work boots was not his family, not his class, not his kind. He wanted the neighborhood to see him draw the line. And my father was the prop. My father set down the pie, set down the wine, looked at me. The look lasted 3 seconds and contained the entire history of a father and daughter. 31 years of driving to job sites at 5 a.m., so his daughter could go to college, of hands stained with concrete so her hands could be clean, of silence and sacrifice and the particular, unspoken hope that every parent carries, that the child they built a life for will, when the moment comes, stand up. I didn't stand up. I stood in the hallway and said nothing. And my father nodded, the nod of a man receiving an answer he feared, and left. Tyler closed the door, turned to me, smiled. The smile of a man who has executed a plan and is satisfied with the result. Relax, he said. It's better this way. I went to the bedroom. I sat on the bed. I called my father. He answered on the second ring, which meant he'd been holding the phone, which meant he'd been hoping I'd call. Papa, I said, and the word came out broken, cracked down the middle, and my father said, It's all right, sweetheart. It's all right. Go have your dinner. He was on the highway. I could hear the road noise. He was driving back to Scranton alone on Thanksgiving, and he was telling me to go have dinner. Friday morning. The courier. The envelope. Tyler's face going white. The lawsuit was not about the porch. It was about money, about a loan that Tyler had taken from my father 18 months earlier. A loan I knew about but didn't fully understand, because Tyler had described it as a short-term bridge, and my father had agreed to it because his daughter's husband asked, and because Ed Callan didn't refuse family. The loan was $460,000. Tyler had borrowed it to cover a margin call on a personal investment, a leveraged position in a real estate fund that had gone sideways. The loan was documented, signed, with a repayment schedule that Tyler had agreed to and then ignored. 18 months of missed payments. 18 months of emails from my father's attorney that Tyler had dismissed, delayed, and eventually stopped answering. 18 months of my father, the hobo, the man in the work boots, quietly, patiently extending professional courtesy to a son-in-law who owed him nearly $500,000 and who had just thrown him off his porch on Thanksgiving. The lawsuit named Tyler personally, $460,000 in principal, interest, attorney's fees, and, the number that made Tyler's hands shake, punitive damages. The filing alleged that Tyler had obtained the loan through misrepresentation, had failed to disclose the underlying investment risk, and had systematically avoided repayment while maintaining a lifestyle inconsistent with his claimed inability to pay. The punitive claim was $1.5 million. Total? Just over $2 million. He can't do this, Tyler said. He's your father. He can't. He lent you $460,000 and you haven't paid back a cent. It was a family loan. It was a documented loan with a repayment schedule that you signed. I've seen the documents, Tyler. My father showed them to me last summer when he came to visit and you complained about his truck. He showed me the loan agreement and the emails his attorney sent and the 18 months of silence from you. And he asked me, standing in the driveway next to the truck you were embarrassed by, whether I knew. And I didn't know. Because you told me the loan was handled. You told me you'd paid it back. I was going to. You called him a hobo. You stood in the doorway of a house that exists because my father's money covered your margin call, and you called him a hobo. And you did it in front of the neighbors so they'd know that the man in the work boots wasn't welcome in your life. In the life his money is funding. Tyler stared at the papers. The papers stared back, patient, precise. The language of litigation that doesn't care about appearances or wine regions or the distance between canvas and cashmere. The language of a man who builds things for a living and who understands that the strongest structures are the ones built on documentation. I called my father. He answered on the first ring this time. Papa, I saw the lawsuit. I know. Why didn't you tell me about the missed payments? 18 months. Because I was giving him time. Because he's your husband. Because I wanted to believe that the man my daughter married would do the right thing if I gave him room. I gave him room, Lauren. 18 months of room. And he used that room to avoid me, lie to you, and throw me off your porch on Thanksgiving. Papa, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for him. Apologize for you. The sentence landed. Not like a blow, like a diagnosis. The specific, precise identification of the thing that was wrong. Not Tyler's cruelty, not the loan, not the lawsuit. My silence. My accommodation. My years of asking my father to park the truck around the corner and bring different shoes and be less visible so that the man who owed him $500,000 wouldn't be embarrassed by his presence. I'm sorry, I said. For standing in the hallway. For not moving. For every time I asked you to change so that he'd be comfortable. For choosing his comfort over your dignity. My father was quiet. The quiet of a man receiving something he's waited for. Not the money, not the apology from Tyler. The apology from his daughter. The words that said, I see what I did. I see what it cost you. I see you. Come home, Lauren, he said. I went home, packed a bag, not everything, not a final departure, just enough for a week, enough to breathe. I drove to Scranton on a Friday afternoon, 4 hours through Pennsylvania, the same highway my father had driven alone on Thanksgiving with his daughter's silence in the passenger seat. The house in Scranton was the house I grew up in, a 3-bedroom on a hill above the river, not fancy, not large, with a garage full of tools and a driveway wide enough for a work truck and a kitchen where my stepmother Donna made coffee and didn't ask questions, because Donna understood that some arrivals don't need interrogation. They need coffee and time and the particular kindness of a woman who loves your father, and by extension, loves you. My father was in the garage, working, always building, always converting motion into structure. He was repairing something, a piece of equipment, industrial, the kind of machine that costs more than Tyler's BMW and does more useful work. He looked up when I walked in, didn't stop working. Didn't come to me. Just looked. The same look from the porch. The 3-second look. The question without words. I'm here, Papa. I see that. I left. For now or for good? I don't know yet. He nodded. Set down the wrench. Wiped his hands on the canvas jacket. The same jacket. Always the same jacket. The jacket that Tyler had looked at and seen a costume. And that was, in fact, the uniform of a man who had built a $14 million company from a single truck and a willingness to do the work that men in blazers considered beneath them. The lawsuit is real, he said. I'm not dropping it. I'm not asking you to. Your husband owes me $460,000. He signed a document. He ignored 18 months of communication. He lied to you about repayment. And then he stood on a porch that my money paid for and called me a hobo in front of your neighbors. The lawsuit is not revenge, Lauren. It's accountability. I know. Do you also know that I would have forgiven the loan? I looked at him. If he'd paid me back, even slowly, even late, I would have worked with him. If he'd called me and said, Ed, I'm struggling, I need more time, I would have given him more time. If he'd stood on that porch on Thanksgiving and shaken my hand and sat at the table and eaten the pie and treated me like a person, like a human being, Lauren, not a hobo, I would have told my attorney to stand down. Because he's your husband. Because family means you extend grace even when the numbers don't add up. He picked up the wrench. But he didn't shake my hand. He called me a hobo. And he did it because he thought I was weak. Because I wear boots and drive a truck and don't own a blazer. He looked at me and saw a man with nothing. And he calculated that a man with nothing couldn't fight back. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about everything. Tyler settled. Not immediately. For 3 weeks, he raged, denied, threatened, called my father's attorneys ambulance chasers, and the lawsuit extortion, and me disloyal for going to Scranton. But the documentation was airtight. My father's legal team had been preparing for 6 months since the day it became clear that Tyler had no intention of repaying. And Tyler's own attorneys told him, in the language that attorneys use when the case is unwinnable, settle. The settlement was $820,000. The principal plus interest, plus a significant portion of the punitive claim, negotiated down from $2 million because my father, despite everything, told his attorneys to leave room. He's still her husband, he said. For now. For now, the qualifier that contained the future. I filed for divorce in January. Not because of the money, because of the porch. Because of the word hobo. Because of the 3 seconds on Thanksgiving when my father looked at me and I didn't move. And because moving now, months later, in a lawyer's office with a pen and a petition, was the delayed, inadequate, absolutely necessary response to a moment I couldn't take back but could answer. The divorce was final in May. I kept nothing from the marriage that I hadn't brought into it, which was almost nothing. My clothes, my books, my mother's ring. Tyler kept the house, the BMW, and the debt that the settlement had created, which restructured his financial life with the same efficiency he'd once applied to restructuring mine. I live in Scranton now, in an apartment near my father's house. Not in the house because I'm 31 and independence matters, but near enough that the truck in his driveway is visible from my kitchen window, and the sight of it every morning. Canvas dusty, diesel smelling, parked in the open where everyone can see it, is a correction. A daily visual correction of every time I asked him to hide it. I work at my father's company, not as a favor, as an employee. Office administration, accounting support, the operational work that a $14 million contracting firm requires, and that I am, it turns out, good at. I earn my salary. I show up. I wear boots on site visits. And they are heavy and practical, and nobody comments on them because at Callan Industrial, boots are what you wear when you build things. My father and I have dinner every Thursday, not Sunday. Thursday, a new tradition, unconnected to the old patterns, belonging only to us. Donna cooks. My father opens wine. Better wine than Tyler ever served because Ed Callan can afford whatever wine he wants and chooses it based on taste rather than label. We eat. We talk. We sit at a table where everyone is welcome and nobody checks anyone's shoes at the door. Last Thursday, my father told me something. Over dessert, Donna's apple pie, the same recipe she'd baked for Thanksgiving, the pie that sat on Tyler's porch railing and was never eaten. I almost didn't file the lawsuit, he said. Why not? Because of you. Because filing meant exposing what Tyler did, and exposing what Tyler did meant exposing what you allowed. And I didn't want to hurt you. What changed? He looked at his pie, at his hands, the hands that had built a company and a house and a life and a daughter, hands that were scarred and calloused and stronger at 61 than Tyler's would ever be. He called me a hobo. On your porch. In front of your neighbors, and you stood in the hallway and said nothing. And I drove home, and I thought about that for 4 hours. And I realized the lawsuit isn't for the money. The money is documentation. The lawsuit is for my daughter. Because my daughter has been standing in a hallway for 4 years, letting a man define her father, and she needs to see, Lauren, that the man in the work boots is not what her husband said he was. That work boots and canvas jackets and diesel trucks are not shame. They're evidence. Evidence of a life spent building things. And a man who builds things is not a hobo. He's the foundation. I put down my fork, looked at my father, at this man, 61, 6'1", 210 pounds, worth more than Tyler would earn in a lifetime. Sitting at his kitchen table in a flannel shirt, eating pie his wife made, surrounded by the uncomplicated warmth of a home where nobody performs and nobody apologizes, and the boots by the door are just boots. I see you, Papa, I said. He nodded. The Ed Callan nod, brief, complete, containing everything. I know, he said. You do now.